welcome to today's class. In this lecture video, we are going to discuss about evaluation of mutual fund. Now let's see the lecture objectives. To evaluate mutual fund. So I think you know what is mutual fund. So now we try to understand to evaluate what is a mutual fund. And finally at the end of the class, you will be able to apply the concept of mutual fund evaluation in your personal life. Now, investing in mutual fund has a great inherent risk assumed upon ownership because when you purchase the mutual fund, then you are considered to be facing certain level of risk. Now, however, the performance of mutual funds can be quantified with the mathematical calculation of the historical returns. Anyway, we can calculate the risk, the performance of the mutual funds with the historical returns. Because when you go to the concerned certain web portals, financial web portals, so there every time the financial data of various mutual funds will be updated, and you will be able to understand how well that mutual fund has performed or past to present. And the correlation of potential risk and potential returns constantly put forth the opportunities to invest in mutual funds and drive maximum potential returns with minimum underlying risk. So ultimately what is required for the investor is the level of risk that is to be identified and understood, and based on that we need to select a kind of mutual fund and try to achieve the maximum potential returns for the kind of risk that is being involved in the mutual fund. Now, evaluation of mutual funds. There are certain parameters through which we can evaluate the mutual fund. So, mutual fund is a pool of money that is collected from various investors and invested in specific investment alternatives by developing a portfolio and ultimately keeping in the view of the investors' expectations or desires. Now, there are various components through which we will evaluate the mutual fund. So, those are risk-adjusted returns, one of the components through which we will evaluate mutual fund, and benchmarking. So, there are benchmarking things like Sensex, Nifty and all through which we will evaluate, and relative performance with peers. So, like the kind of mutual funds also will compare and then we'll try to evaluate, and the quality of stocks in the portfolio and track record and competence of the fund manager is another component in the evaluation of mutual fund. Now let's try to discuss about one by one. The first thing, risk adjusted returns. The main aspect of any investment alternative is when you are investing your money means there is a risk involved in the investment. So you need to rightly understand what level of risk that is involved in the mutual fund and whether we are able to get a good amount of return for the risk what we are supposed to face in the mutual fund. It is very, very important. So when any mutual fund is evaluated, so we need to consider how much amount of risk involved, whether we are able to get the return for the risk what we are facing. The risk-adjusted returns are the calculated returns on your funds make compared to the risk indicated over the period of time. And if compared, a couple of mutual funds which drive the same percentage of returns over the same period of time, the lesser risk funds have higher risk-adjusted returns. Obviously, when two mutual funds have similar returns that have been generated over a period of time, but when you look at the risk of these two mutual funds, definitely will vary. So if you see the risk involved in each and every mutual funds that have generated same return, so then you will understand definitely one particular mutual fund may have lesser risk than the other mutual fund. So simply it will give idea about the investor for the investors that whenever a mutual fund that has given a good performance with a minimum return, minimum risk that is considered, then finally it is said to be as a good risk-adjusted mutual fund. So when you are trying to evaluating various mutual funds, then we need to understand the risks involved in each and every mutual fund, and finally then we will compare the returns that are being generated by these mutual funds with the risk involved in the mutual fund. So then we can understand, yes, the performance of the mutual fund is rightly being evaluated, means the whatever return that is being generated, that is justified with the risk involved inherently in the mutual fund. So this is one of the components to evaluate the performance of the mutual fund. Next component is benchmarking. So every time whenever you are evaluating various mutual funds that are available in the market, so sometimes you may not know what set of mutual funds are of what kind. So with whom we need to compare the existing mutual funds? We don't know generally. So in those scenarios, simply we can compare one particular, any mutual fund with one particular thing, that is benchmark. A benchmark portfolio means any standard portfolio that is available. So if you consider market index like Sensex, Nifty index, so this index or these indexes having a certain number of stocks in there, then we can also consider it as a portfolio, and the performance of this kind of portfolios definitely can be comparable with the existing portfolio what you have developed and invested to assess the performance of these mutual funds. So that is the reason why. So we will compare the performance of the existing mutual funds with the benchmarks. Now, what generally happens with the benchmarks is, so benchmarks are associated with certain level of risk, and also we will understand for that particular risk how much return that the benchmark has generated. Sometimes what happens is the benchmark can generate a certain level of risk, return. During that particular period, certain mutual funds may generate more return than the market index. So means they have outperformed over the market indexes. So those mutual funds are known as the better mutual funds. In the same way, in some cases, even the market goes on like anything. So it's increasing or giving an excellent returns. The benchmarks have generated excellent returns. But sometimes what happens is some of the mutual funds may not be in a position to generate such an amount of return. So there, you could easily understand that these mutual funds are underperformers. So while evaluating the mutual funds, we can also include the benchmark as one of the components to compare the performance of the mutual funds. So you can also consider the historical returns of the benchmark, and based on the historical returns, you can also consider the historical returns of the various mutual funds which you want to consider, and finally compare the performance of both the mutual fund as well as the benchmark, and then understood whether your mutual fund is a better performer or not. So this way of comparing the mutual funds, with the existing benchmarks like Sensex, Nifty, are nothing but a benchmarking. So benchmarking is also another reliable indicator, or as an option for evaluating the mutual funds. Next one is relative performance with peers. So every time, now at most competitive spirit happens only when you compare the mutual funds with the best mutual fund, best mutual funds available in the industry. So that's the reason why relative performance with the peers also another measure, another thing for comparing the performance of the mutual fund. So whenever you compare the performance of your mutual funds with the best performer or the peers or its peers, so definitely that will give you a better and valuable insights on to understand whether your mutual funds are performing well or not. And so relative performance with peers can act as one of the yardsticks of the measurement of effectiveness of the mutual fund. Especially when do we apply this the relative performance with peers? Means especially a certain category of mutual funds like sectorial funds or specific to certain industries. So wherein if you compare the performance with the index or so, then it's not reasonable. So that's the reason why we will compare the sectorial funds. Any two mutual funds or any two peers can be taken into consideration and compare with them. So that way we can compare the mutual funds with peers, and that can give us another active comparison of performance. And finally, let us understand, we can understand what is the best mutual fund. And mutual funds actively try to top the ranking of the fund in the universe and intended towards the higher return for the determined period of value learning. The relative peer performance is recommended. Means whenever you are understand that the mutual funds must be compared for the individuals. So definitely this peer comparison with peers are peers is very much important. So when you compare the performance with the peers, then within the mutual funds you will compare, and you will understand which mutual fund is the top performer. And then quality of stocks in the portfolio. So another thing for the comparing the effectiveness of the or best mutual fund or evaluating the mutual fund is quality of stocks in the portfolio. Sometimes some of the mutual funds may perform looks like they have generated more return, but even then some of the mutual funds generate more return in specific periods. But if you look at the stocks in the portfolio, and if those stocks are not qualitative stocks, then probably you might have earned that particular return with a less quality of stocks. So if you generate such a kind of return with less quality of stocks, so that this return cannot be assured, means cannot be persisted for quite a period of time. That's why quality of stocks maintained in the portfolio is of another important measure through which also we can evaluate the performance of the mutual funds, so that without deviating the or without compromising the quality of stocks, the portfolio could be able to generate better performance and better returns. So definitely its performance is to be good. So that's why we will understand the quality of stocks that are involved in the portfolio, and based on that we try to understand whether the mutual fund has performed well or not. The qualitative statistics and historical performance of the mutual funds would help evaluating the performance. So for this purpose, qualitative statistics and historical performance also are being taken into consideration, and based on that we will see how many quality of stocks are being maintained over a period of time, and in those times how much amount of return the portfolio means the mutual fund has been generated. So this way we can also compare the performance of understand the performance of the portfolio, and also we can judge that this performance can be even persisted for some time as well. So that's what another way of comparing the mutual funds, that is the quality of stocks in the portfolio. And the last one is track record and competence of the fund manager. So another important reason for the investors for making investments into the mutual fund is the making utilization of the fund manager skills. So fund manager is a very important person in the entire whole system of mutual fund, because the investor is ultimately putting their money in the hands of fund manager. So the fund manager has to evaluate the various stocks and various situations, and based on that, you try to take a decision on the the investments, and finally try to win the marketplace. So some of the fund managers may have those skills, but may not. Some others may not have. So definitely, it is very important for the evaluation during the evaluation of the mutual fund that whether the return that is being generated with the skill level of the portfolio manager or not. So now that's the reason why you will understand the track record of the fund manager, and also the level of competitive skills that the fund managers have while developing and maintaining the portfolio is another important parameter for comparing the performance of the mutual fund. So that's the reason why the fund manager is an important person who makes investment decisions, and that's why you need to understand the fund manager's performance according to the fund management knowledge, ability and all. And the fund manager's past performance would be a good parameter to track his record, and to turn to be a great value for your investment certainly. So definitely, if you could observe the fund manager over a period of time, then you will understand the skill level of the fund manager, and you can rely on that while you are investing in the mutual fund. Now let's conclude this topic by saying, using this concept, one can evaluate any mutual fund with the current market scenario and suggest the best mutual fund for him or himself or herself or to any other prospective investors in the end. So thank you. Now let us see a small, okay. Now let, what the disclaimer. Thank you very much.